At exactly 2 a.m., she woke up. Not gently. Not the way people drift from dreams like smoke dissolving into morning air. This was violent. Like being dragged upward through a dark ocean, lungs on fire, mind clawing desperately for the surface, every single nerve in her body screaming just to remember how to exist. Her name was Amara Cole. 26 years old. Music producer. Miami, Florida. At least. That's what she thought her name was. That's what she thought she was. Her eyes snapped open. And the darkness that greeted her didn't feel like night. It was thicker. Heavier. Alive. The kind of darkness that breathes. The kind that watches. The kind that has been waiting, patiently, without urgency, the way something waits when it knows the outcome is already decided for exactly this moment. She lay there for 3 seconds. Not moving. Not thinking. Just existing inside that heaviness. While somewhere deep in her chest, something ancient and animal rose up through the layers of her and whispered one single word. Run. But before we go any further, if you have ever woken up at the exact same time every single night, same hour, same minute, every night without fail, stay with this story. Because what happens to Amara Cole in the next 30 minutes will make you question whether that was ever an accident. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now. Because we tell stories on this channel that most people are too afraid to finish. The ones who stay until the end always come back. Always. Now. Back to Amara. The first thing she noticed was the sound. A low, pulsing hum. Consistent. Rhythmic. Patient. Not mechanical. Machines have edges to their sounds, starts and stops, friction you can feel settle into your teeth. Not natural. Nature has warmth, even in its violence. Wind and thunder carry something recognizable, something the body knows how to file. This was neither. It existed in a frequency that human beings were not supposed to register. And yet she registered it. Deeply. Like it was resonating inside the marrow of her bones rather than simply passing through her ears. She tried to breathe. Slow. Deep. Calm yourself, Amara. But the air tasted wrong. Sterile and metallic. Cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature, the cold of something that had never once been warm, that had existed so far beyond warmth that the concept had never occurred to it. It slid into her lungs and settled there, spreading outward, wrong in a way she felt everywhere but could name nowhere. She tried to move her arms. Her fingers twitched. Her wrists flexed. But her arms wouldn't come down. Not because something was restraining them. Because there was nothing to come down to. No surface beneath her. No gravity behaving the way gravity had behaved every single day of her 26 years. Panic arrived before logic did. It always does. Her head forced itself downward and the understanding crashed into her all at once. She was not lying down. She was upright. Floating. Suspended in the center of a transparent chamber, a vertical column of something that was not glass, not plastic, not any material she had a word for, while the world existed on the other side of it, cold and humming and completely indifferent to her terror. Her breath fogged the surface. A brief cloud of condensation. And in that fog, for just 1 second, she saw her reflection. Her face. Her eyes. Her eyes. They were glowing. Faintly. Soft. Steady. A blue that did not belong to any color she had seen in 26 years of human living. Not the blue of sky or ocean or neon or lead. Something older. Something that predated every word humans had ever invented for the color blue. A blue that pulsed very slightly, in perfect rhythm with the hum. Amara stared at her own reflection. And her reflection stared back. Both of them equally terrified. Both of them equally aware that something enormous and irreversible had already happened. What? Her voice was a ruin. Hoarse and cracked and dry like she hadn't spoken in days. Or weeks. What is this? The sound of her own voice broke something loose inside her. Memories. They came in fragments. Jagged-edged and sharp, cutting on the way in the way broken glass cuts, not from malice, just from shape. Miami. The city at night, warm and electric and alive with that particular energy that only exists in places that never fully sleep. The smell of salt air threading through the bass-heavy music pouring out of every door on every block. A show. Her show. A rooftop venue in Wynwood. The skyline arranging itself behind the crowd like it was performing too. The feeling she always got in moments like that, complete, untouchable, exactly where I am supposed to be, the feeling she'd been chasing since she was old enough to understand she was chasing something. Afterward. Friends. Laughter. The press of people spilling into the street. And then. A flash in the sky. Not lightning. Too slow for lightning. Too deliberate. A light that descended with intention, that moved the way something moves when it knows exactly where it is going and has known for a very long time. The crowd went quiet before they understood why. The way crowds go quiet when something in the collective animal brain registers a threat before the conscious mind catches up. Someone pointed. Someone grabbed her arm. And then. Screaming. Not fear screaming, she knew what fear screaming sounded like. This was something else. The particular sound the human mind makes when it encounters something it has no category for, no framework, no language, when the architecture of a person's entire understanding of reality begins to crack at the foundation. That sound. And then. Nothing. Not darkness. Not unconsciousness. Not even the feeling of falling. Just a gap. Where time used to be. And now she was here. And here was wrong. No, her voice cracked wider. No, no, no. The hum deepened. As if the room were listening. As if the room had been waiting for her panic to confirm something it already knew. Light bled into existence, not from any source she could identify, but from the walls themselves. Thin lines of cold white that crawled outward in branching patterns, the way frost crawls across glass, the way roots crawl through soil, the way something living moves when it is moving toward something it needs. The chamber illuminated. And Amara saw what she was in the middle of. Chambers. Dozens of them. Lined in rows that extended further than the space should have been able to contain. Each one housing a human being, suspended, upright, floating, unmoving. Some with their eyes closed. Some with their eyes open. None of them awake. Her breath seized. She pressed both hands against the surface of her own chamber and scanned faces. 10. 20. 30. More. A woman about her age, dark hair fanned out around her head the way hair fans out in water, face slack, chest moving in the shallow rhythm of someone very far from consciousness. A teenage boy. 16, maybe 17. Soccer jersey. Dried blood at his temple from something that happened before he arrived here. Face still arranged around a terror that hadn't finished moving through him even in whatever sleep he was being held in. An older man. Business suit, jacket still buttoned. One shoe missing. The small wrongness of the missing shoe somehow more upsetting than everything else, the proof that he'd been taken mid-step, mid-moment, mid-ordinary Tuesday. All of them stolen. All of them here. All of them waiting for something that Amara, standing in the center of it all, was beginning to understand she was a part of. I have to get out. I have to find a way. A sharp sound cut the air. A click. Then another. A hiss, that pressurized, specific hiss of a seal releasing and the transparent surface in front of her dissolved. Not shattered. Not slid aside. Dissolved. Retracted into itself like liquid glass being recalled, like it had decided to stop being solid. And without the chamber holding her. Amara dropped. Her knees hit cold metal floor at full force. Pain exploded up her legs and spine. She was grateful for it. Pain was real. Pain was human. Pain meant she still existed inside a body that belonged to her. She pressed her palms flat against the floor. Cold. Solid. Real. Okay, she breathed. Okay. Think. I need to find a door. An exit. Something. She heard them before she saw them. Not footsteps. Presence. A movement that registered in the air before it registered in sound, The sense of something approaching that had never needed to be quiet, because quiet is what you practice when you fear being heard, and these things feared nothing. Amora's hands went flat against the floor. Slowly. She lifted her head. They stood at the far end of the chamber room. 3 of them. Arranged in a formation that her mind immediately tried to translate into something familiar, a group, a committee, a delegation, and couldn't quite complete the translation because nothing about them fit inside familiar shapes. They were tall. Too tall. Not basketball player tall, proportion intact, just extended. These were tall in the way a fever dream is tall. Limbs stretched past the point of structural logic, joints bending at angles that should have produced pain and instead produced only fluid, unhurried, precise movement. Their skin was translucent. The way deep ocean creatures are translucent, the pale of something that has existed so far from light that it evolved past the need to filter it, past the need for any pigment at all. And beneath that pale surface, faint patterns moved. Slow and deliberate. Bioluminescent threads drifting through them like thoughts given form, like the inside of their minds made briefly visible. Their faces were minimal. A suggestion of features rather than features themselves. A nose implied rather than built. A mouth a line, closed, completely still. No expression in any human sense. Their eyes. No pupils. No iris. Just wide, luminous surfaces. Completely filled with that same deep blue that was now living behind Amora's own reflection. Flat and ancient and full of something that wasn't quite emotion, but was perhaps the evolutionary predecessor of it, the original thing that emotion had eventually, imperfectly, been built from. They were watching her. Not with threat. Something more unsettling than threat. Recognition. Amara scrambled backward across the metal floor. Stay back. Stay back, don't stay back. They didn't move. Didn't react to her voice at all. As if her words existed in a register they simply didn't bother to process. And then something arrived inside her mind. Not a sound. Not a voice the way voices work, vibration through air, received by ear, decoded by brain. This was prior to all of that. A presence that appeared in her thoughts the way a thought appears, suddenly, completely, already there, with no sensation of having arrived. She is awake. Amara screamed and grabbed her head with both hands. Get out of my head, get out. A second presence arrived. Colder than the first. More precise. The way a calculation feels when it lands, impersonal, complete, indifferent to how it's received. Earlier than projected. The third being, the one standing furthest forward, tilted its head. Just slightly. The gesture of something encountering a data point it finds genuinely interesting. And then it placed something into her. Not a presence this time. A sentence. Clear. Considered. Weighted with the certainty of something stated rather than proposed. This one is like us. And right there, right at that moment, I need you to do something. If you are not subscribed yet, subscribe right now. Because what Amara discovers about why they said that, what it means, what she actually is, what has been living inside her without her knowing, is the part of this story that people come back to watch again. The part that keeps people up at night. You do not want the algorithm to bury this before you find out how it ends. Subscribe. And stay with me. Because it gets so much worse before it gets anywhere close to better. The silence after those words was absolute. This one is like us. They moved through Amara, past comprehension, past the part of her that was still trying to argue, into something lower and older and more honest. Some place in herself she had never named because naming it would have required admitting it existed. And that place responded. Before her conscious mind could object. Before she could stop it. She forced herself to speak. Like you. Her voice fractured on every syllable. No. I'm not, I am human. I have a name. I have a life. I have people who are looking for me right now, and when they find me. The beings did not react. Didn't adjust. Didn't perform any of the behaviors she would have reached for to demonstrate she was wrong. They waited. With the patience of things that have no relationship to urgency. And she felt it again. That presence. Not words this time, something beneath words, something that words had been invented to approximate but never quite reached. An emanation. Like the emotional content of language stripped of the language itself. Interest. Recognition. The forward being moved. Fluid. Unhurried. Each step placed with an exactness that made human walking look like controlled falling. It crossed the distance between them and stopped directly in front of her. Close enough that she could see the texture of its skin, not smooth the way skin is smooth, but shifting. Subtly, continuously. Like it wasn't fully committed to a single form. Like form was a choice it was making moment to moment and could just as easily unmake. Close enough that she could see her own face in those flat, glowing eyes. Her face. Her glowing eyes, looking back. The being leaned forward. And she lay on the cold metal floor, gasping. Face pressed against the surface. Tears running sideways across the bridge of her nose and dripping into nothing. The being stood over her. Watching. Waiting. Then. You can receive. Amara kept her forehead against the floor. I don't want to receive anything, she said. I don't want any part of whatever that was. But you did not break. The words landed differently than the others had. She heard them the way you hear something about yourself that you already suspected but had spent years carefully not confirming. Slowly, arms shaking, she pushed herself up to sitting. What do you mean I didn't break? The beings exchanged something fast and wordless between themselves, a communication that existed entirely outside any dimension she could access, faster than language, denser than language, the way the content of a year's worth of conversation might be compressed into a single sustained chord. Then the forward one returned its attention to her. The others break. It gestured. A slight movement, barely a movement, just a directional intention, a pointing of awareness. Behind her. Amara's jaw set. She turned. One of the chambers, 3 rows back, slightly to the left, was flickering. The bioluminescent light inside it pulsing erratically, stuttering, fighting itself the way a signal fights when the receiver is failing. Inside, a man. Mid-30s. Strong build. The kind of person who had probably moved through his entire life with the quiet confidence of someone who had never encountered a problem his body couldn't solve. He was convulsing. His whole body seizing in the suspension. Limbs jerking in arrhythmic spasms. Back arching. Face distorted around a scream that had nowhere to go. His eyes were open. But what was inside them wasn't terror anymore. It was absence. Something leaving. The light inside the chamber surged, one blinding, total, final flare, then went completely dark. The man went still. The particular stillness that has no recovery. Amara was on her feet before she decided to stand. No, what did you do to him? What did you do? We showed him. Showed him what? What you just saw. Her breath stopped. The images. The collapsing stars. The burning planets. The silence spreading across Earth like a conversion. The sentence hit her at the center of her chest and radiated outward in every direction simultaneously, the way an impact radiates, the way a bell tone radiates. Amara stopped speaking. The room was very quiet. Only the hum. That's not. She started. Stopped. The words she needed weren't coming. That's not possible. I was born. I grew up. I have a mother. I have memories, I have. We did not change you. She fell silent. The being let the silence exist. Then. We found you. Now listen to me very carefully, because this is the part of Amara's story that I need you to pay attention to. Not because of what the beings are about to tell her, but because of what she is about to discover about the moments in her own life she always explained away. The moments you might recognize. There is something these beings know about the humans they chose, something specific, something that was true about every single person in every single one of those chambers, and if you stay with this story until the end, you will hear exactly what it is. You will hear what they were looking for. And you will hear whether Amara, after everything, makes it back. Stay with me. The room tilted. Not physically. Perceptually. Amara put her hand against the nearest chamber to steady herself, then recoiled from the contact, from the face on the other side of the glass, from the reminder of where she was and what was happening to the people around her. "What does that mean?" she said. "What does found mean?" The forward being moved closer. And she noticed, with the part of her brain that was still cataloguing details despite everything, that she was not stepping back from it anymore. That somewhere in the last several minutes, the terror had not diminished but had changed. Had converted into something else. Something that felt less like panic and more like the feeling before an answer arrives, the feeling of standing at the edge of knowing. You are unfinished. A pause. You have always been unfinished. The word arrived with specific, deliberate weight. Unfinished. Amara shook her head. Kept shaking it. Her hands gripping her own arms like she could hold herself together through pressure alone. No. I'm a whole person. I have a whole life, I have a career and friends, Anne. You felt different. She stopped. Everybody feels different. Not like this. She didn't answer. Because she knew. She'd always known. The way music felt physical to her in a way she'd never been able to fully explain to anyone, not emotional, not even deeply emotional, but structural. Like she heard it with something that wasn't exactly ears. Like it passed through the normal channels and then kept going, down into something else, something further in. The way she had woken, every night of her life, at exactly 2 a.m. Every night. Same hour. Same minute. Without fail, without alarm, without exception, since she was small enough to still have glow-in-the-dark stars on her bedroom ceiling in Atlanta. Always 2 o'clock. Always with the feeling of having just been somewhere else. Doing something else. Something that dissolved the moment she reached for it. She'd spent 26 years explaining that away. Lots of people wake at the same time every night. I'm just a light sleeper. It's a circadian thing. The way she sometimes felt other people's emotions, not empathy, not intuition, felt them, directly, arriving in her chest like a signal, like something transmitted from a source rather than something she inferred from context. I'm just observant. I'm just sensitive. It doesn't mean anything. Amara stood in the chamber room. In the hum. In the blue light. And let the explanations dissolve. One by one. Like they had always been waiting for permission. What am I? She said. Not screaming it. Not crying it. Asking. Genuinely. For the first time in her life. The three beings stood completely still. And then, together, for the first time not one and then another but all three simultaneously, in a resonance she felt in her sternum like a chord struck directly on bone. You are the bridge. The hum dropped an octave. And the room changed. One by one, then in rapid succession, the chambers around her surged back to life. The flickering ones stabilizing, the dark ones reigniting, all of them pulsing with renewed intensity as the humans inside them began to surface. Violently. The way she had surfaced. Upward through dark water. Lungs burning. Their mouths opened. The screaming started. It hit her like a wall, and not just the sound. The feeling of it. Every person in every chamber, all their terror and confusion and grief, all their desperate love for the lives they'd been taken from, arriving in her chest simultaneously, 40, 50, 60 distinct human beings worth of anguish pouring into her at once. Amara staggered. Fell to one knee. Covered her ears, useless, she wasn't receiving it through her ears, and bent forward under the total weight of it. Stop, stop, please. Make it stop. The beings didn't move. Didn't intervene. Didn't alter anything. And she understood why. This was the process. This was what preparation meant. Every one of those people was being shown what she had been shown. The collapsing stars, the burning planets, the silence spreading across Earth like a conversion, and for most of them, the resistance would be catastrophic. Most of them would break. The way the man had broken. 3 rows back. Who was not moving anymore. Who would never move again. Amara pressed her forehead against the cold floor and felt all of them, every single one, and it was the worst thing she had ever felt in her life, and she knew, with a certainty that came from the same place the hum came from, From whatever she actually was underneath the name and the career and the city and the 26 years of careful explanation. She knew she could stop it. She was designed to stop it. She raised her head. Her eyes were burning. The blue light no longer faint, no longer a glow, a radiance, spreading up her arms, illuminating the bones beneath her skin like light through frosted glass, like something that had been waiting in the dark of her for a very long time and had finally been given permission to exist. She looked at the forward being. If I do this, her voice was barely a voice. If I help them through, what happens to them after? What are they? What do they become? The being regarded her. They continue. As what? As more than they were. And if I don't? If I refuse? The emanation that arrived was not quite sorrow. But it lived in the same neighborhood as sorrow. They end. Amara closed her eyes. She thought about Miami. The rooftop. The crowd. The salt air and the music and the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be. She thought about her mother's voice. She thought about every ordinary Tuesday she had ever lived through and taken completely for granted. She thought about the man in the chamber who wasn't moving. She thought about the teenage boy in the soccer jersey who still had blood on his temple. She thought about everyone waiting for all of them. She opened her eyes. She stood up. Her whole body was trembling, but she stood. She turned to the nearest chamber. A woman. Her age. Her height. Dark eyes blown wide and filled with the specific emptiness that precedes total collapse, the moment just before a person breaks, where everything has already been spent and there is nothing left between them and the void. Amara walked toward her, each step feeling like a decision. Not a decision she was making freely. A decision that had been made for her before she was born, written into whatever she actually was at a level deeper than choice. But a decision she was consenting to. That felt important. That felt like the only sovereignty she had left. She raised her hand to the chamber surface. Her fingers were shaking badly. I don't know if this is right, she said. Quietly. To the woman on the other side of the glass, who couldn't hear her yet. I don't know if you choose this. I don't know if I'm saving you or taking something from you. She pressed her palm flat against the surface. But I know what happens if I don't. Something moved through her. Not from her. Not a transfer or a transmission in any direction. More like she became a medium. A conduit. Whatever she was actually made of, whatever had been living in her bones since before she had a name for it, flowing through her the way current flows through a wire, finding the path of least resistance, completing the circuit. Not force. Not control. Recognition. Their eyes locked through the transparent surface between them, through the blue light and the hum and the screaming of everyone else, and Amara let the woman feel it. Not the visions. Not yet. Just the first layer. You are not alone. I was where you are. And I did not break. The woman's body stilled. Her face changed. The emptiness receded, not replaced by calm, not replaced by peace, but by something more honest than either. The expression of someone who has stopped falling because they have found a surface. Not safety. Just something to stand on. Her eyes, slowly, unmistakably, began to glow. Blue. The same blue. Amara stumbled backward. Stared at what she'd done. What did I just do to her? The beings answered together. You completed her. That's not, Amara's voice broke. That's not saving someone. Saving someone means they go home. Saving someone means their life goes back. You made her like you. The words fell into the room and stayed there. Heavy. Immovable. True in a way that made Amara feel the truth of it physically in her chest, in her hands, in the blue light she couldn't turn off. She turned and looked at the rows. At the dozens of chambers. At the dozens of people approaching their breaking points. At the man 3 rows back who had already reached his. She looked at her hands. Glowing steadily now. Not fading. What happens when I reach all of them, she said. After this, then what? The forward being was quiet for a long moment. The longest silence yet. Then you will know what we know. About what's coming. About everything. And the world? My world? What happens to it? The silence stretched. That depends on the bridge. She understood that. In a way she couldn't have understood an hour ago, she understood it completely and without comfort. She was not a weapon. Not a soldier. Not a subject. She was a junction point. A translation layer between what was coming and what could survive it. Everything that happened next would run through her. Whether that meant salvation or catastrophe. That would run through her too. The weight of it should have destroyed her. An hour ago it would have. She looked at the next chamber. The older man in the business suit. Eyes beginning to flutter. Getting close to the edge. Amara walked toward him. Each step still heavy. Each step still a choice she was making. She raised her hand. Pressed her palm to the glass. And as the connection opened, as the blue light spread and the hum resonated through her and the man's eyes stilled and then slowly began to glow, she felt the forward being watching her from across the room. Felt something emanating from it that she hadn't felt from it before. Something it had not offered her since she woke up screaming in the chamber. Relief. Like something that had been waiting for an impossibly long time had finally arrived. Like she was exactly what they had come here for. Which meant. She moved to the next chamber. And the next. And as she moved, the thought that had been circling her mind since the beings first spoke into her began to land. They had come to Miami. They had taken dozens of people. But only she had woken early. Only she had not broken. Only she had heard the hum like it was already hers. They hadn't chosen her from the crowd. They had come for her. Everyone else was secondary. Collateral to whatever she was. To whatever she was for. Why me? She said, between chambers. The forward being answered immediately. Because you were almost ready. Almost, she repeated. You needed one more thing. She stopped. Turned. Looked at the being directly. What thing? The beings exchanged that rapid wordless communication. Then the answer arrived. Not in words. In the images. One final image. Not collapsing stars. Not burning planets. Not cities going quiet. Ha! Standing on a hill she didn't recognize, in a world she didn't recognize, under a sky that was both familiar and completely alien, 2 moons, 1 sun, the light landing wrong with the beings standing behind her and humanity standing ahead of her and something enormous happening in the space between. Her as the bridge. Her as the thing holding the 2 sides together. Not by force. Not by control. By being both. By being the only thing in existence that was both. The image dissolved. Amara stood in the middle of the chamber room with blue light pouring from her hands and the hum living in her bones and the weight of an impossible future pressing down on her from every direction. She looked at the remaining chambers. At the people still waiting. Still fighting. Still holding on. She thought about home. About whether home was still there. About whether, after everything she now was, she would recognize it if it was. She thought about the rooftop in Wynwood. The warm salt air. The feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be. And for the first time, she understood what that feeling had actually been. Not belonging. Preparation. Her whole life. Every 2 a.m. Every inexplicable feeling. Every moment of hearing music with something other than ears. Preparation. Amara closed her eyes. Just for a second. And when she opened them, she walked to the next chamber. And the next. Moving through the room like current through a wire. Completing circuit after circuit. Person after person. She was halfway through the row when she stopped. Because something was wrong. One of the chambers at the far end. The one she hadn't reached yet. Had gone dark. Not flickering. Dark. Amara's chest tightened. She started moving faster. Reached the chamber and pressed both hands flat against the surface and pushed everything she had through the connection. Nothing. The chamber was empty. Not empty of a person, the boy was still inside, the soccer jersey, the dried blood on his temple, but empty of whatever it was she'd been completing in the others. Whatever the beings had been calling potential. It was gone. She spun around. Why? Her voice filled the room. Why didn't you wake me sooner? I could have, he was right here. The beings didn't answer immediately. The silence stretched long enough to be its own answer. Then. You were not ready. You chose timing over him. We chose you. 3 words. She'd heard them before. This one is like us. But now she heard them differently. Not as a statement of similarity. As a statement of cost. She looked at the boy in the dark chamber. At his face, still arranged around a terror that had nowhere to go now. At the soccer jersey. At the dried blood. At everything that had been a person until 10 minutes ago when she was still working her way down the row. And she felt something that was neither human nor alien. Something that was exactly what she was. Both. A grief so specific and so total that it had no name in either language. She pressed her forehead against the chamber glass. I'm sorry, she whispered. Not to the beings. To him. Because she finally understood what it meant to be the bridge. It meant deciding, by existence alone, who crossed. And who didn't. She finished the row. Every chamber she could still reach. Every connection she could still complete. When the last one opened, when the last pair of eyes began to glow that deep, ancient blue, Amara stepped back and looked at what the room had become. Dozens of people. All awake now. All glowing. All looking at her. The way you look at the person who pulled you from the water. Except. They hadn't come from the water. They had gone deeper in. And so had she. The forward being moved to stand beside her. Not behind her. Beside her. And for the first time, it said something that wasn't information. Something that wasn't instruction or explanation or revelation. Something that, in whatever limited, imperfect way these beings experienced anything that resembled feeling, was gratitude. You are complete. Amara stood in the room that hummed and glowed and breathed. In the middle of all these people who were no longer only people. With her glowing hands and her burning eyes and the hum that had lived in her bones since before she knew what bones were for. She thought about Miami. About whether Miami was still there. About whether the flash she'd seen in the windward sky that night had been just hers. Or whether it had been happening everywhere. In every city. On every continent. Whether there were other rooms like this one. Other bridges like her. Or whether she was the only one. Whether everything that was coming through her. She looked at the beings. At their ancient, luminous, unreadable eyes. Is it too late? She asked. For Earth. Is it already too late? The forward being regarded her for a long time. Then. That is the question only the bridge can answer. And for the first time since she woke up screaming in the chamber. The beings moved. All 3 of them. Walking toward a wall that was not a wall, a surface that dissolved the same way her chamber had dissolved, retracting into itself, revealing beyond it a darkness that was not the darkness of night. The darkness of space. And Earth below. Her Earth. Still there. Still lit. Still moving in its orbit with the slow, indifferent momentum of something that has survived everything that has ever tried to extinguish it. Still there. But. Different. Even from here she could see it. The lights in certain cities. Pulsing. Blue. In rhythm with the hum. Amara pressed her hand to the surface of the opening. Cold against her palm. And she understood. She wasn't going back. Not to the life she'd left. Not to the rooftop in Wynwood, the music, the warm salt air, the feeling of being exactly where she was supposed to be, because that feeling had never been about where she was. It had been about what she was. And now she knew. But whether knowing was enough. Whether what she was would be enough. Whether the bridge would hold. That was the question she would have to live inside. Without an answer. For now. 2 a.m. She opened her eyes. And the world below kept glowing. Waiting. And that is where we leave Amara Cole. Not saved. Not lost. Standing at the edge of something enormous, looking down at a world that is already changing without her permission, holding the weight of being the only thing standing between what humanity is and what it's about to become. If you felt that ending in your chest, if you're sitting there right now wondering whether she makes it back, whether the lights in those cities mean what you think they mean, subscribe. Because Amara's story is not finished. And neither is the question she's standing inside. The ones who subscribe are the ones who find out what happens when the bridge finally has to choose a side. Don't miss it.